Do here tonight is talk about train collecting before the VTC and who the early players were in train collecting in Richmond and how they got their trains and what they specialized in and what eventually became them and their trains. And so here with me is Jim Crone, who's 58 TCA, and what's your number, original number? TCA?
Can't remember, 236, I think.
Yeah. And Ricky Davis. I don't know if you, maybe you know, Ricky was very active, was an officer of the club early in the beginning, was really one of our founding fathers. What was your number?
In here?
Yeah.
I don't remember that. I do know the TCA number.
Yeah. And so he's TCA 64, what?
1009.
1009. And Ricky keeps track of this. Interesting. The latest he's been able to figure is Jim is 36th in seniority in the country for TCA.
At least. He may be.
And
I'm about 162nd.
yes, of the 30,000 TCA members now, roughly 30,000, 20-some thousand TCA.
Ones that are living now, you mean?
Yes.
Who are active in the club. Yeah.
Right. So, Jim, if you have a few comments, let's start.
Just what you were commenting, I was thinking back, I met, I think I told you this before, that I met Lou Redmond by accident in Trenton, New Jersey. I used to go in from Princeton and go to the hobby shop there. And I went in one day with a Knapp locomotive, which looks like an HO. And I bought it in 1937 when I was working for a department store at 17 years old. And the owner of the store sent me to the toy fair to buy the trains for 1937. And while I was there was an elderly gentleman with a big white beard. I got talking to him because he had what looked like a brass HO locomotive that I was pretty interested in. Turns out that was Mr. Knapp, who back in 1892 was making trains and then decided to quit because of this guy Lionel was coming on board. But something you said, and it slipped my mind. You know, that's what happens when you get to be my age. But anyway, let me pick up here that Knapp locomotive grew. Well, what happened was I took it because I wanted the wheels changed because it wouldn't run on HO very well, because he didn't really make accurate HO track. And these two, he's the owner of the hobby shop, says, don't you ever touch that and don't you sell it. He says, that's going to be a collector's item one day. And then as a result of that, he says, I got two guys coming in here this afternoon. If you could stay around, I'd like you to meet them because we're going to start a toy collecting club. Call it Highland Park. Does anybody know where that is? On 3rd Avenue. So I got the name. The fellow's name was Colonel Stockton. He was a full colonel in the Army. He was retired. But his basement was also full. But in it, he had a blue comet, not made by Lionel. You got any idea who it was made by? Boucher. Lionel Boucher. Now, along with that, he had many other things that were off-brand, and at the time I didn't know who made them. And that's where I really became interested in finding other collectors who would say, oh, that came from so-and-so, and that was made in this place and that place. So that was my really beginning interest in collecting, seeing what he had. If you want to see that blue comet today, you can do that. And Wayne Handy and I took a drive one day down to Williamsburg. And there we met a fellow, or we knew him and went to see him. and his name is Ned Mankin. Now, he's the son of Ed Mankin. Does anybody remember Ed Mankin?
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
because he was really one of the first collectors, and he was a really annoying fellow. He came to my door every other day, wanted to know, what is this? And how much is this worth? And do you think I ought to buy this? And he was there all the time. But then one day, he brought his little boy with him. He wanted his little boy to see a real Lionel blue comet.
Yeah. A photograph.
Well, Ned bought the Boucher blue comet, and if you go visit his son Ned today, Ned owns the Boucher blue comet. The fellow that I met on Fendall Avenue, and then he died the next month, he says that Colonel Stockton has more trains than all the and they weren't train collectors then, train operators they called them, all together in the city of Richmond.
Do you remember, Jimmy, that he also converted all the trains to two-rail
That's right.
and had his own brass rail track?
Right. And many of the things that were, he also turned his own drive wheels.
He did a lot of cutting and changing.
Right.
So it really adversely affected their collectability.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
So,
Oh, that's
I
right.
visited his layout after it was no longer operating because I was interested in making an offer, but I could not get it. I never got him to give a definitive price.
what range would you have been giving back then?
I think we would have, I was with Alan Carroll, and I guess we would have offered, $2,000 or $3,000 probably.
Ricky will talk about Alan Carroll a little later. He just passed away. He's one of the early collectors. Please continue.
Yeah.
Mhm.
By the way, since he said that, I saw these two boys as young boys. I find out one of them was in college and one was graduating from high school. But Mac Hines, do any of you know Mac Hines? And Ricky,
And Mac might still actually be a member of
he is,
the club.
yeah,
Yes.
He rejoined TCA too.
yeah.
2 or 3.
He has had a number of careers, not very recently, but in the 90s, he owned Gundlach, not Gundlach, what plumbing?
Gilman.
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 Was it Gilman? Okay,
Right.
yes.
Well, as we lived on Palmyra Avenue, right behind Ed Willie's drugstore, if you remember where that was. And one evening, these two boys come out. My wife always says those two little boys that came, but he's telling me he was
I was in
in,
my 20s.
you were in college, he said.
In college.
But anyway, they both came rapping on the door, and they were looking for a train collector, and they heard I was a train collector. Do you remember anything about seeing a collection?
No, I remember going around to various collectors. We were trying to find all the collectors in the area,
Yeah.
and I can mention some others.
Right. But anyway, there really weren't any collectors when I came here, and it was very hard to talk to anybody about collecting because they all thought you were a little nuts.
So this would have been 54 when you came, 53?
53.
Because the TCA was actually not formed technically until 54, right?
54,
Right.
summer
Right.
54.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah, and Lou Redmond would come, and he was on
Yeah,
business, of
Alexander
course,
Small.
visiting Duplex Envelope, but he would keep driving me that it's time you to join. But anyway, I finally did, and I was glad I did. I was sort of sorry I didn't join earlier, actually, because it was a fruitful place for finding what you needed.
And Jimmy, you had relations with Alan Carroll very early because
Alan,
he
yeah.
bought some things from you or sold to you,
Oh, yeah.
and you apparently painted the tender to a 6 for him, which I have still.
Is that right?
Mhm.
I'd forgotten it. But he lived about 4 or 5 blocks from me in
Great Court.
right, on Newport, you're right.
Great Court.
And,
Where?
Great Court Avenue, 14.
Oh, Great Court.
Great Court.
Oh, great, oh, I see.
It's in the north side.
Uh-huh.
And at that time, like I was saying, he called me, came to our house on Amherst Avenue. And that's 1 block over from Bellevue. And I cannot think of the name of it, and he was very early on, long before Ike came on scene. Does anybody remember a toy train repair shop? The
The
man,
place was called a Roundhouse.
Roundhouse.
And it was
Right.
located down in the, what I'd call slums
that's
off
right.
of Pole Street.
Back of Forest Cemetery.
500 Purdue Avenue.
That's it, that's it.
That's the famous address in the flyer.
over by one over by Morris Cemetery. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Scarlett Branch did some repair when he was a kid.
Say, wait a minute, let's hear what he said.
Scarlett Branch was a kid. He did some repair where he worked with this man, and the man passed away suddenly.
Yes,
He
that's
was
right.
18 years old, and he had to take over the train repair, and he learned fast. But this was about on 8th and Main, I think. I don't remember dates on it. That's all I
Yeah.
can
Now,
tell.
when would this have been? Like, in May.
Well, he was 18 and died. Gosh,
Oh, this is Garland.
Yeah.
So Garland was 18.
yeah,
So he'd be what? He'd be well over 100 now, wouldn't he?
yeah, yeah. So that dates back a bit.
Yeah. So that was
He
Probably
said he
pre-war.
threw away parts.
yes. Yeah. Well,
You know,
well
rather-
pre-war. Mhm. Yeah.
Rather than save all parts, he threw in the trash sometimes. Please.
But anyway, there weren't too many train collectors around, but they were sort of closet collectors, and they could call themselves operators. But I don't know if you remember, but Billy Tallheimer asked me if I could display some trains at the Tallheimer store. My brother was Santa Claus there for a number of years. And anyway, do any of you remember going up to the dance hall area and seeing glass cabinets made with trains on display?
Up the 5th floor
Yeah.
auditorium.
Auditorium, yeah.
Yes.
I remember. What building?
Mhm.
Tallheimers.
Tallheimers.
Tallheimers, right. And he had me put some trains on display, and he built these glass cases. And one of them was a roundhouse, I remember. And I had 3 round tables revolving, and I had a blue comet sitting on one. Instead of having it running, it was just revolving on a round table. But anyway, as a result of that, we really got people to join TCA who had never thought about it. And another interesting thing about TCA, originally it was all in Pennsylvania, and called the Pennsylvania, well, what did they call it? Pennsylvania Division at first. But anyway, Lou Redmond finally got me to join, and so he got the Eastern Division to go down to the James River, so it would include my household.
Oh.
But,
Oh, so that's how Richmond was divided at the James River.
right,
It's always been that quirk.
yeah.
It was Manchester to begin with. City of Manchester, they combined Richmond in 1910.
But anyway, that's why the Eastern Division is so long, because I lived in Richmond. But anyway, after that display was put in Tallheimer's, we began to get members joining TCA. Of course, that was before we had Virginia Train Club.
Yes.
Jim, what was the year that you did that display?
I cannot remember. I was looking for it to see it, couldn't find it.
Glenn, do you remember?
I think it was pretty late. I think it was well into the 70s.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm. It was after they had given up the train layouts and things like that. It was, and it was kind of like a winter, just a lot of things, and it was, as you say, a big happening in the what was called the auditorium, the Tallheimer's auditorium.
right. Harry Augustine. Now, I never could get him to join TCA, but he has a complete set of Lionel with a 380 392E locomotive and passenger cars. And he still sets it up every Christmas at 90-some years old and runs it. But he got it from that hardware store. His father was well-to-do, and he used to go down to that hardware store with his son, and he saw that train set up for Christmas, and he said, I told Santa Claus I wanted it, and he got it, and he still has it, and still sets it up. But I was talking to him today about that, but he never did have time to join TCA. But several people did join TCA, and they had that Baltimore conference. Several of us went up from Richmond. Now, one of the people that I ran into who became a member of TCA was Drury Bond. I don't know if any of you remember him. He's passed away now, but in 1972, we needed some money in TCA, and so I had an idea that we could accomplish that by getting Lionel to make a locomotive for us. Do you know that Lionel made a tender? Actually, they didn't make the whole tender. They were going
Made the shell.
and they made the tender shell, which everybody could buy the wheels for. So anyway, we talked about, well, what I said was, we're not boxcar collectors. Hell, we had 6 or 8 boxcars, which we'd get one every year, starting in Pittsburgh was the first one, a blue one. But anyway, TCA got underway, and in fact, we tried to make him an honorary member, and he wouldn't even accept that.
No, he never joined the,
No.
yeah.
Well, it was all right. Didn't need him anyway. But anyway, let me see if I got. That about covers it. It was interesting that you brought that train out, because Bill Williams, he did join TCA, but he was an expert clockmaker, and at one time I used to collect clocks, and I do have 2 interesting clocks. I got rid of all the clocks, but he fixed them both and brought them up to standard. My mother was born in 1892, and my grandfather wanted a clock
Trains.
with a
So he told me about a meet that was going to be at Hershey, Pennsylvania in October 1963. So I drove up to Charlottesville and met him there in a service station, I think, and he took me to Hershey, and I was amazed at the amount. It was very teeny compared to York. And bought a few things. I remember buying a 10 set for $9 with passenger cars. That was a good ideal price with bed wheels. And I'm pretty sure I slept on the floor in his motel. I think that's right. That sounds price was right. And on the way back, we stopped in Baltimore, and we saw we saw the last run of a Baltimore streetcar there. It was out to Catonsville. It was, 47 years ago. They have a new one now. Not going to Catonsville.
Yes,
But
How
going
many
out.
buildings were up out when you went up to other place?
Did what?
How many buildings were on the other place that you went to, the first place you went to?
Just one. Just one.
one building.
Mhm. It's just single. It's a single hall. Seems to me it was down in the basement or something.
Oh, okay.
I think that's. And it ran till Sunday morning. Must have been Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I must have spent a couple of nights with him.
That engine that Mr. Crone built the node for, I've got that whole set.
Oh, okay. That's a nice. But that was my first. I was not a member. I didn't join.
They got today compared to then.
We first met as TCA. We met in Hershey, Pennsylvania, and we met at the Cocoa Inn in the ballroom of the Cocoa Inn. But they said they were going to tear the Cocoa Inn down, And so we had to find out where we could go, and what happened was, we didn't find a place. So Lou made an arrangement with the people who had the auction barn, and where they auctioned off cattle. And he made an arrangement where we could rent that on Friday and Saturday. And that was in York, where,
Oh,
I thought they went to
They went to
Lancaster. They went to Lancaster
Because
first.
it's at the it's at the intersection of 30
That's
and
right.
896.
yeah, that's right,
It's now that discount, the
Mall,
outlet,
yeah.
the outlet mall.
right.
Mhm.
That's where
Yeah.
it was born. That was the first time.
That's where the barn was?
Yes, it was on that
Yeah,
property.
was it, which side was, I thought it was where they have the Chinese buffet and on the north side.
I think it was on the north side. You're
North
right.
side.
Yeah, it was on the north side.
There's
I'm
a
wrong.
kind of
Right.
little shopping center there.
Right, that's right. Yes,
I
it
see
was on the
it.
north side.
I see it if I'm up there.
Yeah.
But anyway, Lou and Eric and I all went over to York, to the Yorktown, after we had the York meet, meet in the auction barn, we called it. And we talked to the fellow who was the president of Yorktown, Ian, and he was in a group of 5 doctors who owned a couple of hotels, but he's the one that told us that we would be able to rent just the Blue Hall. It ended up, we couldn't rent the Blue Hall. We had to rent the whole York Fairgrounds for the weekend. And actually, we do rent the whole fairgrounds, but we started out in the Blue Hall.
About 69, was that the first year?
Probably.
Because I think the year I sold ours, trains was the first year. Or was it
67, I think. But anyway, it doesn't. I should have brought a picture of it, because we got a picture of all the members of TCA when the last time it was held at Yardley.
I think that was published on one of the TSA quarterlies, wasn't it?
Yeah, just recently.
Might have been. But see, we got too big for the to meet at Yardley. It was beginning to grow too much.
Jimmy, tell them about Ed Alexander being the model maker.
Oh, yes, did any of you know Ed Alexander at all? He naturally was interested in collecting trains, but actually he was a model maker and made, and when I say model, I mean if you decided you were going to make anything, a new kind of a razor, for instance, a razor blade holder, he would come up with the drawings, and then you would approve it, and then he would make a model of it, handmade model. And do you remember the Paris Fair and Trilon and Paris Fair
Yeah.
at the World's Fair in New York?
39.
Yeah. And in that Paris Fair, there were trains running all around the Paris Fair, inside.
Inside, yeah.
And all of those were handmade by Ed Alexander. And he could make a model of anything that you wanted to try to produce to sell, but he was interested in trains. And he had a marvelous collection of things that you never would dream of seeing. And the one that I always thought was it was delicate and fine, but it stood about this high and it was about that big. How many of you know what the DeWitt Clinton looks like?
Yeah.
The DeWitt Clinton is what started the New York Central Railroad, of course. And he made a model of that. I've forgotten what the some club or something was meeting, and he built that model for them, and then he bought it back from them after the conference was over. Something that went on up in New York.
How many Richmond people were going to TCA in those very early days?
Well, that's what I started to say at the beginning. I don't remember any, really. There weren't any.
So when you started in '64, how many were going?
not very many. I think Alan went at that time. But as I said, I went up with somebody from Lynchburg when I went the first time to Hershey. I didn't go with anybody here.
No, I was thinking about York more than anything else.
Oh, that's, that was several
Well, that was
years
later.
later.
Yeah, so York would have
Oh,
been
by the
started
time
in
of
68.
York, yes, yeah.
Because you
Alan
got
was
me in
actually
by
out of it.
68.
Yeah, you went to the, place in
York-
Lancaster.
Yeah, I went to the last Lancaster,
The
and,
cattle
and
barn or
then
something.
I've been to every York except one since it started in 68. But, now who would have been the premier post-war Lionel collector in the 60s?
In this area.
Yes.
They probably didn't even collect them by that time.
I'm
Were they
wondering, were they
collectors?
just
That's who
really
you.
boys hanging holdover from guys who just happened to have a lot of Christmas stuff? Who would have been?
I had quite a bit in the late sixties.
Yes, and never bought new, always bought used, right?
I had new too, I
Uh-huh.
had some new, yeah.
Where were you buying your new?
I
from?
bought a few new pieces off and on,
I've told the story many times about Tommy Farmer
like I
when he
bought.
was managing.
Well, they were new, but they were old at the same time. They were brand new pieces, like for Morton Meyer, I had
Uh-huh.
pieces.
Yeah,
I bought.
Morton Meyer was a
in Tom
lawyer
House, I think.
who got hold of Womaco's, the Purdue Avenue firm, when it went bankrupt.
Yeah.
So he got hold of the leftover, I don't know, I get the court appointed it to him. And, you know, he had a
He had lent
house,
some money apparently or something.
somehow he got, and he had a house directly behind, the house still exists, where the retail merchants are at Willow Lawn Drive, Willow Lawn and Monument. And of course, that was before they put in the drain, and so that area would flood. And so his garage, where he had all of the Womaco stuff, would flood. It flooded twice. And the Lionel stuff was on top, and the American Flyer stuff was in the bottom. So the American Flyer stuff twice got submerged in the water, where the Lionel stuff was always above the water. So I wound up buying all the Lionel, the American Flyer parts. I remember for $100.
Oh, God.
Yeah, he would sell
yes,
to you.
after, you know, and I still have all the original parts from Womaco for American Flyer. But the American Flyer parts were always, of course, the little stuff would just rust through, and the springs would just become dust. And the all the other things, like the bigger things, like the rods, they were always tarnished. So it's very hard to restore anything with those parts because they were twice underwater.
Yeah, I bought some 64 boxcars from him. Bought the B&O Sentinel. Bought 2 or 3 of them, I think.
Now, who would have been then the premier Flyer collector or owner? I'm trying to think. You remember a guy named Shellhor who we went from? His father was from Floyd. We went and appraised his collection. He had a big collection in a very fancy house in Chesterfield, and he was a stockbroker or something like that.
Did we buy it?
No, we didn't
No.
buy it. No.
He didn't sell.
Didn't sell.
But
he
we
had-
did buy some collections.
Yeah. Oh, yes. And with Dave Shedler.
With
And we
David,
would
yes.
wheel and
Oh,
deal and
yeah,
sell.
yeah, this, I was reading.
Fred's
something.
philosophy and mine's always been you buy reasonable and sell cheap, but always making a little bit on it.
Yes.
But you get rid of stuff. You just get rid of it and turn it over.
I looked back recently though, and I had bought some Lionel 516 Hopper cars for $250, and very quickly doubled my money on them. They would be worth a lot more now. That was
Just-
the problem.
just,
They keep doubling.
Yeah.
And I usually took it and bought stock with it, or
Uh-huh.
something like that.
Well, with O-Gauge, was the first sort of collectible things the 64, 64s? Is that what? When they
You mean in
started
post-war?
specializing? In post-war, yeah.
Yeah, but there were also things like the GG1 and the 773, the Berkshire with the 24,
rolling
26
stock?
tender, things like that would be very collectible.
Now, I never will forget, you were always way ahead. You always said that if you're going to buy a Flyer, always buy the Northern and the 080s because they were so different.
Well, it was different. They
And
were.
they were intrinsically different than the others, and they would do the best, and of course they always have. If I would listen to you.
Well, I was always scared of just being a number collector.
Mhm.
That if you bought certain pieces they had a crossover appeal to people who are interested in railroads and old toys. Like cast iron would definitely have that.
Did you see, by the way, it's at Sotheby's this week, where there's a antique
yes,
and
very
toy train
huge.
collection that they expect is gonna go for the tens of millions of dollars?
Yes, there's a video on it that's incredible.
Is
all
it on
It's all European.
Oh, it's all
Oh, it's
European.
Yeah,
Ben, Lachlan.
yeah.
So it's very little American then.
It's no American.
Oh, it's
all
supposedly
European.
right. It ends in
He had
1940.
that, yeah,
Uh-huh.
he had that before, got tired of it and sold it
It's
all. All
got-
the Lionel.
But it's a lot of it is there's a lot of restoration.
Trains. I did read that, but I did it by looking, and I have a way of memorizing. So I just looked at trains, and I looked at catalogs. I put things together and learned about them. And of course, at that time, things were pretty cheap. When I was first in trains, I didn't have the money to buy the $5,000 collection. I was working then. I was in college. I had some income. But I still remember when I put as a goal to have $1 a month investment income, so I obviously wasn't real high at that time. And I also did it by selling, though. I bought and sold rather fast so that I could build up something. And would keep something each time. I'd keep a little bit for me. But I didn't have the financial wherewithal to go out and just buy and hold everything, which was bad.
But did you network with anybody, or did you pretty much do it yourself?
Mac, somewhat with Mac Hines, some with George, some with Dave Shadler, maybe.
Yeah, we were active in the beginning of the TCA. We would put ads in the newspaper and ads in the Trading Post, and they weren't very productive, but they were there was something.
We got something out of it. Kept a little bit. And
Yeah.
I've got some interesting letters from, I think, is it Al Cox out in Washington? And back in the 50s and 60s, he had a network of people all over the country. And he'd go out, in the 60s particularly, they go out and when Lionel would come out with all their products in October, November, December, he'd go out and buy a set or buy 2 or 3 sets. And he was interested in the 64 boxcars.
But they were collectible.
That's all he was interested in. He'd take the boxcar out and they'd start counting the rivets. And I've got one letter where he said, you know, there are different rivets on different cars. And he passed that information on to his East Coast buddies. And through all of that, they determined that there were variations in different shells and different colors and collectible variations. So that was a networking thing with at least that part. It's fascinating reading.
Now, how did Tommy Farmer get involved? How was he?
Tommy was probably at the low end of collecting, I'll say, because I bought him out twice. I paid $100 the first time to buy his whole collection, and I believe somewhat more. I can't remember if this is $200 or so to buy him out the second time. And they did include a 238 with passenger cars once.
Because he was interesting. Remember, he had when
was his
trains were
time.
going out in the Christmas of '61, he had a train store on.
Oh yes,
on Belt
yes,
Boulevard,
yes. He
right?
got me to work for him.
Yes.
It
for trains.
failed.
No cash, right?
Yes. No, he paid me $1 an hour, and I took some of it in trains, which was better. It was on the boulevard, and I had been ill. I had had a very serious ruptured appendix before that, and I remember. I can't remember. My mother had to drive me out, I think.
Right,
I
he had
couldn't
no
drive.
heat in the store.
He had no heat. I finally told him I had to have some heat.
Winter time.
There's no heat in there. I had to
running a
work.
retail store. No
Sitting
heat.
wrapped up.
Bill Fox did that for a couple of years.
And he worked, so I was in college, and I would sit in there and sell, and his sales were, I can't remember whether he sold $200 or $300 for the whole Christmas season. It was pretty low, even for then.
Whereabouts?
I bought a Seagrave set, and I
He
brought
was
it in here show and tell. And I didn't know what it was. I bought it because it was pretty.
From Tommy?
No.
Oh.
From the guy that did our
Dale Stocks.
repaint. Who
Charlie
painted our?
Lyers.
Charlotte.
No, not Charlie. No, the guy up in Pennsylvania that did.
Oh,
Newbauer.
He's in West
Yeah.
Virginia,
Yeah.
Berkeley Springs.
Yeah, Newbern.
Still there.
Ball.
Anyway, it didn't make any difference. But anyway, I didn't know what it was, except I thought it was pretty. And Tommy saw it, my God, I thought he was gonna faint. He jumped up and down, he says, "You know what you have?" Well, no, and he told me.
Oh, yeah, he was fairly knowledgeable about trains.
Yeah.
And then he, of course, then he became the second man, he became the chief employee of Carter Eichmann.
That's right, yes,
Became
in the
the-
train
uh-huh.
whistle stop.
In answer to your question, he was 1,000 feet north of where the light is, where you used to go into the old Sears at Belt Boulevard and Southside Plaza. So he would have been on the east
He
side
was on the east side, that's right,
of,
in an old house.
right, an old house.
Yeah,
An
sort of like a
frame house.
bungalow.
Right,
Uh-huh.
uh-huh. A 1920s house.
Sort of
that was then
gutted.
torn down
Yeah.
for a bowling alley or whatever, you know.
And
became
he
that.
rented it, and I can't remember what he rented it for, it's not very high.
Now,
but-
when would that?
It
It
was,
was 1962, because I had the operation.
it was 60, so it was 62 then.
Yeah,
Is he still alive?
no.
No, he passed away. Tommy, of course, was a member, very active in TCA and here.
Born about 1933,
Yeah,
he was
me
a
and
Korean
TCA.
War veteran.
Well, in this year's observation, with Ed Mankin, he had a Shasta
In the summer.
set, he had a Shasta set.
Tommy,
Yeah, that he mentions. Now, that's a fairly valuable
I don't remember it.
set.
I didn't get that.
What else that wasn't?
I
He
don't
had a
know. I thought
lot
he
of
said
junk in marks and
Yeah.
stuff when I bought his collection, but he did have that 238 in, which I still own, in the boxes. That was his prime item.
Well,
He had some standard, but standard like 8 bodies, things like that, nothing much.
Well, when did Carter come along?
Oh, later.
In
70s?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was much later.
And for the first several years, he had a tri-level house. He operated a bottom
Oh,
end.
this basement.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Of his, and then he went to where the great big greenhouse is.
Yeah.
You know, right now, which is the
Over,
Target, where the
yeah.
Target is now at Forest Hill.
Clapham
It was a
Hill.
little shopping center.
And he said he would, because I used to sell trains through him. And he said, you know, this would be a great business for 6 months a year. You can make a fortune, but you lose it all the next 6 months.
Yeah.
And we never found anything that would complement the other 6 months. And then he got on to, he and his boys, they had property down in Nag's Head, and they found it was much more profitable they were very handy of running a repair service in Nag's Head. And he and his boys went there.
But he had a heart attack.
Yes,
And,
he
he
died.
died long before Tommy.
Yes,
Farmer,
right, died very young.
Tommy was much worse health, but
Mhm.
probably
But in essence, Henry, of course,
a
was
member of the,
Henry a charter member?
I think so.
And his main business was repairing jukeboxes,
He
right?
right on
Ju-
Route 1, wasn't he?
Up at the old wigwam.
Yeah,
He was up there and then he
But no,
moved
wasn't he
over.
there, was he before or after he had on Shepherd Street, just 1/2 block south of Monument, next to the Stanley Market?
That's right.
Yeah,
he had
that was after the wigwam.
Oh, that was after the wigwam,
Yeah.
okay. Mhm.
And, he repaired some trains and he wheeled and dealt.
Yes,
and-
and
And
say,
who was that?
Henry Campbell.
he
Right,
was
he really-
dismissed by TCA.
Oh,
They
really?
kicked him out, yes.
Who what?
Yes.
What was that?
Henry Campbell, is that right?
Yeah, but what did you say about it?
Oh, TCA kicked him out for some kind of bad dealing.
But he was an interesting fellow in the sense that, and he was very close to our founders, like Jack Hewson.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was very close to them.
Well, he used to sell at the antique shows. Too,
Oh.
in trains, maybe in the late 60s, early 70s.
Well, I knew him in the 70s.
Jim's just shown. So here we have the Lionel service stations from 4849 and 5253. And what do you think would be the only common denominator of there weren't many, of the Lionel service stations between 48 and 52, so it's 4-year difference. That would have been the peak. Who do you think would have been the lone one on both?
Don't know. Tell us.
Jones and Gooding. Would make
Okay.
sense.
Hardware store.
Yeah, Jones and Gooding. You remember the
Multiple.
appliance store?
Yes,
Right.
so sold
Right,
other
Jones, right.
things. Yes.
And Womaco in 52 was listed, and Womaco was at Womack.
Well back, that's
Yeah,
right.
and Union Electric was 52. And in 48, 49, now I don't remember this. Anybody remember on
Waymack, that's right, I remember him now, after he.
Center Hardware? Does anybody remember Center Hardware at 328 North 6th Street?
No.
I don't remember that at all. So 328 had to be north of Broad,
Yeah.
because,
28, that's
yeah,
good.
so it would have been one block north of Broad. But I don't remember that. Jones and Goodings and Zephyr Miniatures. But you remember, Jen?
Let me look at him
Yeah.
again, I do
Uh-huh.
remember him.
So those, what's that?
I do remember him, he was near, Tom Harris's, garage, repair garage.
Oh, okay.
What was his name?
I thought you would say that one thing in common was none of them in business
Yeah,
today.
and that would be, that is also true. Right, that is of the six, none of,
When did Rollettes come into the picture?
was Rollett's ever a repair shop?
Yeah,
I don't
I've got-
think so. I
I've got a
think-
I've got a 59,
Oh,
So
and they're
later.
listed
I don't,
in that.
I don't think,
And they are in business, yes.
yeah. I don't think Rallies was ever a repair. I think they would send it.
The Roundhouse, there it is.
oh yeah, the Roundhouse.
They
So
were-
Womaco,
They were Lionel Service,
Pretty.
station,
Were they?
5960.
Oh, okay, maybe later, but in the late 40s and early 50s, they were sending their repairs to Waymack. I know that.
so Wayback was
One of the
listed,
treasurer of Rallis took off with all the money and they ran him out of business.
oh, when
Remember
was
that?
this?
Huh?
When was this?
I don't know when it was.
Oh,
Robert's still in business, isn't he? As a
Yes,
bike shop.
right, they're still in business.
Well,
This-
that's not where they were though. They had to move out to
Oh,
more.
yeah, they are on Staple.
Right,
Farm.
now for a
Yeah.
while though, they kept both locations. They moved out in the early 60s.
Yeah.
And for a while, they kept both locations, but they only kept, I'd say, the downtown location maybe 3 or 4 years. By the mid-60s, I think they were already
it was
gone.
gone by the.
Right.
I don't think they ever had trains at the Staples Mill Road.
Yes, they did.
Oh, did
They
they?
actually
Okay.
carried flyer. I mean, there's
They
certain
did
things.
carry flyers.
Yeah, there's certain things I regret. I
A
remember
combination.
the trains. I always thought the north, you had a combination of income and a combination of the weather, where you were forced more in the
Yeah,
side.
that's true.
And those two things together, the income and the weather, lent themselves to train train interest for boys. So
But
the
not
trains
in
were-
New England.
No.
Above Massachusetts.
I wonder if
and
that's because there's no money.
Vermont, New Hampshire,
Yeah.
and Maine had almost no collect. They
Yeah.
have them now.
You know, you don't think of it.
Very rural.
The New England states actually have the highest ratio of used cars to new car sales in the country. Because they're not well-to-do.
Yeah.
Oh, true. If you
Yes,
scratch
yes,
Vermont, and I've been
yes,
there a lot, you
uh-huh.
find West Virginia.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah. Well.
Go behind the tourist
yes,
place.
yes, uh-huh.
George,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
mentioned something funny about Ricky and the trains in the trunk. As a kid, I would visit. I'm from Pennsylvania, but I'll go back up there and sometimes stay during the summer. And in the evening with one uncle, there would all of a sudden this old car, it's happened about once a week, would pull in the driveway. And, the guy would open his trunk and we'd go look and he would have standard gauge trains. I mean,
Yes.
just anything.
Uh-huh.
Driving around to the various farms
Yes.
and sell it.
Probably desserts.
No.
It's
No.
And just
a different
And this
era.
is fairly recent or a long time ago?
well, in the 50s.
Oh, in the 50s, okay. That's a while back.
Well, thank y'all. 9:15. So we appreciate it. Really appreciate it. And Ricky, yeah, Ricky,
It's nice having Ricky.
yeah. Oh yes. Yeah. Absolutely.